Actually, let me take you back to the last days of November, before the first snow fell. Now back to the beginning of December. I like winter. I like how the snow muffles all the sounds. It is the quiet season. It helps finding the silence within.
turismus est infirmitate fiere, eram omnibus semper muniam adversis, per Dominum nostrum isum Christum Filium Tuum, qui tecum vivere regnat in unitate Spiritus Sancti Deus, per omnia saecula saeculorum. Amen. Lectio epistolari Pauli Apostoli ad Roma. O altitudo divitiarum sapientiae scientiae, quam incomprensibila sunt judicia Deus, et vestitis investigabilis Pensia Sancti Evangelii secundum Matteum. Gloria tibi, Domine. In illo tempore dixit Iesus discipulis suis, data est mi omnis potestas in cielo et in terra. Euntes ergo docete omnes gentes, baptizantes eos in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Docentes eos servare omnia quecumque mandavi vobis. Et ecce ego vobiscum sum omnibus diebus, usque ad consummationem saeculi.
But here on the southern side, the white blanket rarely lasts long, and December soon brought Föhn, the warm wind on the lee side of the mountains that melts away the ice. He gave me a chance for a few more chores outside. In Italy, there are churches everywhere. Not all of them look very impressive from the outside, but some may contain great wonders. There's an app where you register with your ID and then are able to unlock some of these remote houses of God with a QR code. And in this case, it was definitely worth it. I also used the trip to stop by Arti Mestieri, a cooperative that specializes in ecological building materials. They collect tons, literally tons, of bottle corks, which they recycle to use for insulation. I myself had gone there to buy panels for insulating the portion of the back wall of the house that is underground. Cork has many great properties, and it is a wonderful material to work with. I had felt inspired by the frescoes I had seen in San Maurizio outside the village of Roccaforte Mondovì. I wish I had more time. But there's always something to work on, some lecture to prepare, some script to revise, some catechesis to record. There remains little leisure to maybe develop skills, take courses, recover what I've lost by not practicing. I've started this canvas 25 years ago and not touched it since. I don't know if I will ever finish it. It is just meant to be an exercise. I remember those days, sitting in my little room under the roof of the library building at the institute where I was a student. It was also there that I first discovered G.K. Chesterton. The books by no other author have I reread so many times. It may be evident from how often I quote him that I have difficulty hiding my joy flipping through his pages. Here is one last pearl that I want to quote in length. If for no other reason than to get maybe some of you to pick up a book of his. Much has been said, and said truly, of the monkish morbidity, of the hysteria which is often gone with the visions of hermits or nuns. But let us never forget that this visionary religion is, in one sense, necessarily more wholesome than our modern and reasonable morality. It is more wholesome for this reason that it can contemplate the idea of success or triumph in the hopeless fight towards the ethical ideal, in what Stevenson called, with his usual startling felicity, the lost fight of virtue. A modern morality, on the other hand, can only point with absolute conviction to the horrors that follow breaches of law. Its only certainty is the certainty of ill. It can only point to imperfection. It has no perfection to point to. But the monk meditating upon Christ or Buddha has in his mind an image of perfect health, a thing of clear colors and clean air. He may contemplate this ideal wholeness and happiness far more than he ought. He may contemplate it to the neglect of and exclusion of essential things. He may contemplate it until he has become a dreamer or a driveler. But still, it is wholeness and happiness that he is contemplating. He may even go mad. But he is going mad for the love of sanity. But the modern student of ethics, even if he remains sane from an insane dread of insanity. The anchorite rolling on the stones in a frenzy of submission is a healthier person fundamentally than many a sober man in a silk hat who is walking down Cheapside. For many such are good only through a withering knowledge of evil. I'm not at this moment claiming for the devotee anything more than this primary advantage, that though he may make himself personally weak and miserable, he is still fixing his thoughts largely on gigantic strength and happiness, on a strength that has no limits, and a happiness that has no end. Doubtless, there are other objections which can be urged without unreason against the influence of gods and visions in morality, whether in the cell or street. But this advantage the mystic morality must always have. It is always jollier. A young man may keep himself from vice by continually thinking of disease. He may keep himself from it also by continually thinking of the Virgin Mary. There may be a question about which method is the more reasonable, or even about which is the more efficient. But surely there can be no question about which is the more wholesome. I remember a pamphlet by that able and sincere secularist Mr. G.W. Footy, which contained a phrase sharply symbolizing and dividing these two methods. The pamphlet was called Beer and Bible. Those two very noble things, all the nobler for a conjunction which Mr. Footy in his stern old Puritan way seemed to think sardonic, but which I confess to thinking appropriate and charming. I have not the work by me, but I remember that Mr. Footy dismissed very contemptuously any attempts to deal with the problem of strong drink by religious offices or intercessions, and said that a picture of a drunkard's liver would be more efficacious in the matter of temperance than any prayer or praise. In that picturesque expression, it seems to me, it perfectly embodied the incurable morbidity of modern ethics. In that temple, the lights are low, the crowds kneel, the solemn anthems are uplifted, but that upon the altar to which all men kneel is no longer the perfect flesh, the body and substance of the perfect man. It is still flesh, but it is diseased. It is the drunkard's liver of the New Testament that is marred for us, which we take in remembrance of him. Where do we look? Where do we direct our gaze? This world is an imperfect one. It is fallen. We are fallen. But the whole idea of pilgrimage is to recognize that this world is not our home. I've lived in many places, passed as a traveler through others. I still go out there when I join groups, go on adventures with scouts, or undertake another long pilgrimage in search of a story to be told. But I'm getting older, and I find myself attached to this little patch above the cliffs. I miss my garden when I'm away for longer, and wonder about the things that grow, the birds that sing, the wolves that howl, and the chamois as they graze undisturbed. I feel more attached, while at the same time I must recognize that this tiny slice of the mountain isn't really mine. It belongs to me in a legal sense. There's a title. But things are passing. I am passing. In what sense does the large chestnut tree behind my house belong to me? I was not the one who gave it life, let it grow. I do not sustain it. I'm not really its owner. If anything, I may call myself its custodian. I may be allowed to use it for a time. I don't want to sound like one of those romantics. Don't get me wrong, I am a romantic, but I try to avoid the superficial that infects much talk about nature. I do not call the earth my mother. She's too wild for that, too dangerous, too careless. But with St. Francis of Assisi, I'm willing to call her my sister, for we have the same father. St. Francis is a saint who was instrumental in my conversion. He was a gift, before he was taken away again by shallow political biographies and an insane amount of kitsch. I still shudder when I see red poppies, because every time I half expect Franco Zeffirelli to send his 1972 Francis actor running through the field with a soft camera filter. I bite on my tongue when someone starts singing Laudato Si. Don't get me wrong, the Canticle of the Sun, which Francis wrote, is a marvel. Even more so because the saint was on his way to going blind. But it is not silly, flippant, or trivial. St. Francis may have been a fool for God, but he was no fool. He ought not to be robbed of his depth. I consider it a crime that many renditions of the Canticle leave out the last verses. Praised be you, my Lord, through our sister bodily death, from whom no living man can escape. Woe to those who die in mortal sin. Blessed are those who will find your most holy will, for the second death shall do them no harm. Death, which we are wont to push out of our thoughts whenever possible, should not be treated thus. If death is a sibling, much like earth or moon, as St. Francis sang, it ought to have a place of respect in our lives. The finality of this existence is what gives meaning to our limited time and the actions we choose. We may be afraid of dying, but we ought not to be. Billions before us have died quite successfully. Rather, we should concern ourselves with the art of dying, which our forebears called ars moriendi. It is an art to be acquired while we still happily walk this earth, or more likely, as we struggle and stumble through life. Whether our thoughts about death are morbid or joyful, whether we call death an unspeakable horror, or as St. Francis, our sister, will be shaped by what we direct our focus to, the highest good beyond, or what we deem the worst thing in this life. If it should be the ultimate perfection, all things will fall into place. With this object of our contemplation comes first the right desire, and then the proper ordering of things. We will distinguish the important from the unimportant. We will be still able to appreciate the things of this world, but also recognize their finitude. We will not demand of them what they cannot give. We will have as if we had not. We will own as if things weren't ours. If not perfectly so, we will at least be always reminded by the perfection that we have before us. For we are but pilgrims, and wander this world for a few short years. Our home is not here, not even on a beautiful mountain like this, but somewhere yet to come.